Denise,
Good afternoon.
I'm glad to see you. And friends, as we start, what is the name of this program? It is not Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You. It's two trauma survivors walking
Walking
each
each
other
other home.
home. So we're going to do that. Denise R. and I will do that. But the first thing we got to figure out, my friends, is how to share the screen, or is that it, Denise? I want to make Denise a co-host. And
So I have the chat up. Let's see.
it says show.
Is anybody in the waiting room?
No, not yet. It's a
Okay.
holiday, so we might just be us two again, but let's
It
see.
may.
Um, we figured this out last time and we're all really
We
happy with ourselves. And so I'm going to try participants again, and that doesn't do it. Um,
we tried clicking on my name
yeah, now where's your name? How do I bring your name up, sweetie?
under the chat.
Okay, let me see. Chat. You know what, Denise, I'll keep trying. I'm missing the chat, but let me close it off and see if that'll do something. Um, okay, chat, your name doesn't come up.
Let's see if I type something.
Thanks for sticking with us, my friends. This is probably silly for people that are wondering what the hell we're doing,
We're going to figure it out.
but we are. Okay, meeting group chat. Denise, that's where your name comes up.
Did it come up?
Now it came up, but now what can I do? Uh, it doesn't say make co-host. It came
Hmm.
up. You know what I'm going to think of? Let me try reactions. No. Let me try notes. Nope. Let me try participants again. Denise, now. Okay, let me see up there. Try the three things. Three things. Yes. Yes.
Okay, now I got the wrong view. I just see myself and I want to see.
If you look to participants, girl, you will now see. Oh, I hear what you're saying. Um, Upper right-hand corner, maybe the rectangle.
No.
Meanwhile, I'm going to address our pals that are with us so that will be joining us
Yes.
directly. OMG. Hello, friends, on this. Actually, in Massachusetts, it's cold, it's foggy, it's rainy, and I need to put something warmer on. But right now, I want to say I'm Holly Elissa Bruno, and I'm really glad to be with you. This program's been going for more than 4 years, and it used to be called Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. We have renamed it two trauma survivors, or could be three, could be four, but right now, two trauma survivors walking each other home. And what we do, Denise and I, we focus on, and whoever joins us, we focus on the fact that we don't deny that we're trauma survivors. We tell the truth about being trauma survivors. We accept the reality of being trauma survivors. And at the same time, are open-heartedly and enthusiastically optimistic about having good lives. So instead of pretending or denying that we didn't have awful stuff happen, I say it happened. It happened and it hurt. And it hunkered me down and it hurt my brain and it hurt a lot of other things. And now I have choices. And we invite you when you join us every week to look at, okay, what happened to the extent you feel like you can say so? What did we learn from that? And how can I unlearn all of those lessons of surviving or build upon them so that I can have now a real active, fully
Authentic,
alive life. Authentic. What else would you say, Denise?
authentic is really what I strive for.
Yeah, tell us more about that. And tell us
Well,
about you
I'll tell
too,
you,
girl.
last week I learned something that was to that we need to be heard. I think you sent a meme afterwards that for us to heal, we have to be heard. And I learned that last week. It's hard for me to not interrupt when someone's talking and say, "Oh yeah, that's happened to me. Oh yeah, I had that." And so I'm practicing now. I want to practice now to just listen and remember that I had someone listen to me and hear my truth. And that's what helped me grow. And so now I need to be the listener and to let people be heard. So that was a real exciting thing to reflect upon during the week.
Have you given that a try? And if so, how did it work?
Well, I'm going to try it here at this meeting because this is where we have our conversations about our trauma. And you can't. Well, you could just talk about it anywhere, but this is here. We are here. We are safe, and so it's a place, to be heard and to listen. And so that's exciting.
Girl, I hear you. I really do. And I have a both end for you. For me, I was taught to be quiet. One of the burdens of being a traumatized child was, and I say it a lot because Dr. Claudia Black expressed it when she said the rules are don't you talk. Don't you talk. Don't you trust anybody outside the family. And I always have to say, and of course, how could I trust anybody in the family since they were the perpetrators and the predators? And then don't feel. So, what I do to heal is a both end with what you're saying. I listen from the heart, from the soul, and then I speak up. This is new. You see, I've learned and taught myself that it's okay to speak up if something really touches me and I need to say it in the moment. Um, and that sometimes can mean a blurt out. You know what I mean by blurting out? Sometimes I just blurt
Right,
out.
right. Which that's what I tend to do is blurt out
And you know what? Why do we blurt out? Why would a trauma survivor blurt out?
because we were taught not to. That I mean that's because we have this place for this discussion. You know, we want to get our part in there or get our part out.
Get it in
We,
and get it out, girl.
this weekend, my brother-in-law had a birthday party at his house, and they are from a totally different socioeconomic class than me. I don't relate to their conversations that much. And my brother-in-law, kept saying, "Hey, lady." And the first time I just let it go. And then the next time, "Oh, are you having a good time, lady?" And I turned to him and I said, "I don't identify as a lady." And he goes, "Oh, that's okay." And he ran off. But I've been thinking about it and I'm going to talk to him about it because he really wishes that we were back in the 50s, where the wife is home and Ozzy and Harriet and all that stuff. And he has mentioned that to me before. And I told him, no, if we go back to that, then my life is not valuable. I mean, I
Not
can't be true.
acceptable. Not
Right. I can't be
existing.
true.
Can't
And,
be yourself. Right.
right. And right. I have to pretend that I'm Harriet from Ozzy and Harriet, and I'm not. And so, and I have been saying that I don't identify as a lady a lot, but that was part of my abuse or my grooming in this culture was to be ladylike. And whenever I was told act like a lady, I was being corrected, not encouraged or not, you know, supported. I was being reprimanded. I wasn't acting. I shouldn't act like that. However, I was acting. So
I hear you, girl. I'm sorry, you're going to say so.
no, that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm thinking about. That's what I wanna, next time I'm with him, I want it to tell him that little story about lady is offensive to me.
You
It's
know, go ahead.
reprimanding.
It's
It's
reprimanding, it's offensive, it's restrictive,
yeah,
and it's annihilating.
right. It's disappear. You're
Hmm.
one of the lady. Right,
Right. Um, yeah, I hear you. I hear you that for the generation when I was raised, being ladylike was a mandate. And ladylike meant not being myself because I was a tom girl.
right.
Ladylike meant keeping my needs together,
Mhm.
smiling, dressing very appropriately, not to get attention, but like a little girl should, and being very polite and not bothering anybody. It meant essentially being silent and obedient and quiet and just following instructions. It didn't mean having a personality.
Right,
Ladylike, I think beneath that, Denise, was a quest to move up in class. You mentioned you're from a
right,
different class than he is. It was a requirement to learn to move up in class. If I could
right,
hide the things about myself that weren't, well, they weren't ladylike. If I could hide the stuff about myself that was real and authentic, then I might have a chance of moving up in class.
right.
See that?
Exactly. Same.
Yeah. So say more. That was true for you.
Yes. Very, very similar. I think, when I was a kid, I watched a lot of television and Woman's Lib was happening. And
Ah,
so it was just the beginning of when, I became aware of Woman's Lib and Burn Your Bra, and which I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew that I did not want to be a housewife and have those duties and responsibilities, even though I loved ironing and doing dishes and cleaning. I liked those things, but I did not like that. When I looked at my mom's role or her life, I did not want that same life. And I verbalized it. I'd be there ironing. I mean, we were ironing handkerchiefs. We
yep.
were ironing t-shirts. We were ironing, all of Jack's things.
And
And
Jack was your brother.
evil stepfather.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and right, and his shirts for work and whatnot, which
Did you
I
iron?
loved ironing, but
There was a smell to ironing that was good. There was something
yeah,
very clean
yeah,
and
with that
warm.
starch too and the
Yeah,
sound. Oh yeah,
yeah.
I loved ironing. And I felt very adult
I felt
ironing.
competent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I felt
I was
confident.
better at it than my mom, and she would say that, and so that was a good,
Well, that's
I liked
something.
that. Yeah,
Plus, the other thing was people would leave us alone. We had work to do.
right.
At least I remember being left alone. I'd go into what my parents called the utility room. Utility room had the vacuum cleaner, the washer and the dryer, the ironing board, and it was where we entered the house and left our coats and stuff. But it was where we did tasks, chores. Chores, that was the big word. We did chores.
Chores.
And that was a required competency was ironing. And I also liked putting on a freshly pressed blouse that
Jeans.
looked
I liked pressed jeans, and we pressed a crease in the front,
good.
like a pointy
That's,
crease.
you know what, girl? That's a beautiful memory. And I have another memory. And here we go about the complicity of the patriarchy with traumatization. My sisters and I were not allowed to wear jeans. And I couldn't understand that because they were comfortable for working. They were like, who cares if they got dirty? For hiking, who cares if they got dirty? They could be washed. But my father was from an immigrant family, and jeans denoted people who were immigrants or people that were working class. And so there was another message. If you were going to be ladylike, you couldn't wear
Right.
jeans because that was just like all those other working people. And we weren't like all those other people. We had to be better than them. I mean, I didn't feel better than anybody else, but I was kept getting taught we're not like them. We were. I mean, that was another one of those crazy things to learn. Did you get that too?
I did not get that. I got my the way we heard about culture was we are curbstone setters. We have a little bit of everything in us.
Curbstone setters. What does that mean?
That's how what they call dogs that are mixed breed.
Oh, okay.
Curbstone setters. They have a lot of different breeds in them. And so she would say that about us because we had a Polish last name, Rokicki it is now, but I'm originally it was probably Rokicki. But
Rokitsky, I love. Yeah,
right.
Rokitsky.
So my uncle was very racist too. So he used to call us Polacks and, say ugly things. But so when we tried to question about that, she would say, we're curbstone setters. We have a little bit of everything.
And that was
So
that.
more like we're like everybody as opposed to we're not better than anybody either. That was kind of a thing.
So fascinating. A curbstone setter. Curbstone would be at the curb. I'm trying to figure out where do you think that image came from? Curbstone setter.
From a dog sitting on the curb.
Okay. Or I
And
would have thought curb. Go ahead, finish it.
uh, and it's just a dog of mixed breed.
Okay. And see, I went, given my incest survivor stuff, I went to the, not in a sad way, I just went to the fact that dogs, when let loose, would be on the curb getting it on with each other.
Right.
And you might have a setter and a Labrador, you might have a Cocker Spaniel and a Saint Bernard, everything happened on the curb and some emerged as curbstone setters and some emerged as curbstone dachshunds, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
We used to call them dachshunds. Um, but I got you. Here. I want to relate this week's program to last week's program, and to say that last week and the last couple of weeks we've been talking about boundaries. And last week for me was powerful, Denise, because what I got was every single person who joined us and was willing to share her story, every single person was raised without boundaries that respected us, which pretty much translated into no boundaries that helped us develop as children, helped us grow, helped us find our identity, because we also talked about I don't have an identity unless I have boundaries. If I don't have
Right.
boundaries, I just bleed into whoever's around. And that was what I learned to do, just fit
Well,
in.
boundaries are also safety.
That's a really good point we made too, that safety is essential for discovering who we are. And that's when you told your wonderful story about welcoming the kids to your classroom, right? And
Right.
what was the message you wanted those kids to get?
You're safe here. You are safe.
And did you ever feel that as a child?
I don't think so, really. I don't.
Did you ever feel safe out of doors when you were riding your bike?
Yeah, I felt more safe out on the streets in the city of Toledo than I felt in my home.
And there it is. I felt safe in myself when I was outside of the house because it was inside the closed doors that the damage was, it took place all the time, that the harming was done, that the cruelty was done, that the beatings were done, that the disdain was done. All of that took place inside the house. And when we got outside the house, we had to act as if that didn't happen inside the house.
Right. And act ladylike.
And ladylike. And that's part of how we could know what we were supposed to do. I knew that a lady had to wear white gloves to church, had to wear little white socks folded down. Later on, had to wear stockings, which I hated, with garter belts, which I also hated, and had to smile. And what else was there about being ladylike? Listen to the men and help the men feel really good about themselves.
Right.
Help out in the kitchen. Help out with the little children. That I didn't mind. But help out in the kitchen, do the stuff nobody else wanted to do. And here's another one. Don't take the last cookie on the tray, because the ladylike little girl will turn into a spinster.
Right.
I mean, you and I are probably both spinsters now, right? We're not
Right.
married.
We are actually spinsters.
Hey, welcome, girl.
We turned into it. It's not so bad.
It's pretty good. I prefer it too. Maybe that's why people didn't want to let women become spinsters, because it's not.
Right. It's too good.
It's actually good. I mean, I'm wearing what I feel like wearing today. I got purple and fuchsia hair and blue because I feel like having that. I've got the biggest earrings on I could find and they look like lily pads to me, and I love them. And I'm going to New Orleans next week, and I'm going to meet Lizzie, the lady, listen what I said, the woman who makes these earrings.
Oh, fun.
Isn't that fun? And
Heck
I've been
yeah.
sending her photos of natural like fractals, natural designs, natural flowers, natural petals, that the things that occur in nature that I love, like dragonfly wings,
Right.
like lily pads, like oh my goodness. What's another thing that you love in nature that just occurs over and over?
Well, your story reminds me of a friend I have who was actually a student. I had her children in my Head Start class, and
Okay.
now she's an artist in Colorado, and she actually does flowers, actual real flowers. She presses them and somehow makes them acrylic or preserves them somehow. And they're really
Yeah,
beautiful. I should send you the link to her
please do, honey.
page. I
A
can't
friend,
remember yeah, I can't remember the name of her page. Can't
that's
remember.
okay. It'll
Jupiter,
come back.
Jupiter something, I believe.
Hey,
But
when you find it, send it to me or also post it on the chat because somebody else might be interested. A friend of mine, also a trauma survivor and also an early childhood professional, gave me these beautiful, huge pansies, and they were encased in some kind of plastic. And I wore them for years, but then they faded. They were purple. They faded. And I remember her telling me this story. She was with her sister. They were at a craft fair, and the sister pointed at the earrings, and Marina looked at the earrings, and they both said my name at the same time. What I like about
awesome.
that is that, you know what? We get our identities
We
back.
do.
There wasn't an identity. I love flowers. I love colors. I love scents. I mean, this is my favorite season because the lilacs are still, they're not much left, but they're still blooming. And there's nothing like the scent of a lilac for me. What is it
Do
about
you
spring that, yeah, go ahead, sweetie.
do you have lilacs in your yard?
I do. I have
I
a
heard
purple
it's
lilac.
very smart. It's very smart to nip them off once they're done, because that's when the new seedlings come. If you wait too long to nip off the deadheads, you end up nipping off the new stuff too. So right away
Oh,
when they are done, it's good to nip them.
so deadheading is it's a kind of a nasty, ugly meaning,
It is an ugly name.
deadhead, but like freeing the seeds.
Right.
There could be another way to say it, but I naturally, instinctively deadhead. I
Uh-huh.
instinctively remove seed pods once they've turned into seeds. And then when my garden this year is resplendent because I have columbine, those beautiful flowers that look like uh, intricate bells with like eyelashes coming out of them. I have them blooming everywhere and in abundance. Why? Because I snapped off the seeds once they gotten big enough and just dropped them. I was like
Right.
the Johnny Appleseed of columbines, and I got them all over the backyard. I got them in the side yard. They're purple, they're pink, they're yellow, they're blue. And I just got one that's like white centered with deep dark purple that I'm going to plant. And that instinctive deadheading, or that instinctive waiting until the seeds just form and then snapping it off,
Right.
I wonder if that's the secret to it, because on my lilac bush, I have just let it be. But what I noticed with the lilac bush is always under the lilac bush, up come all of these new lilac bushes. And I don't want them all because they will take over the flower garden. So what I do is pull some of them up and leave some. But that's interesting, Denise. Do you take off the flowers when they're dead and before the seeds have formed, or do you just take them on?
Yes. For the lilacs,
Okay.
I was listening to a woman on YouTube about them.
Okay. And
And
she said,
yes, and you snip them before they seed because of something happening in here. Like you'll get less blooms
okay,
next year.
well, all right, girl, I'm going to go do that because they are returning to the flowers are at their ending. I've still got
Right.
some, but I'll just go snip them. What I did to shape the plant, and I apologize to the plant, was my lilac tree is like also growing straight up as well as being bushy, and so I snapped off big stalwart shank of lilac and brought it in my house. And then the next day, a week later, I went out and there was another shank that didn't have any blossoms on it. So I apologized again to the plant. I snapped it off, and and now the tree looks more like a lollipop. And I feel like that's probably going to help the blooming too. Why do I
Yes.
apologize to the trees? Because I just read again something that I always knew. I think children that grow up out of doors rather than inside houses. I mean, I grew up out of doors. I survived indoors. Um, I know that makes sense to you. Um, I oh wow, I just lost my train, but it's okay. I just read that when we break an arm off a plant, we break a tendril, we break something off a plant the plant feels it, registers it, and it hurts.
Yeah.
Just like,
I've seen a
yeah,
recent recording where someone put a device on a tree and then you could hear it singing
yeah,
basically. And yeah, they have. I do that. I do it too when I'm plucking the milkweed for my monarchs and looking for eggs. When I get there, I always say, "Hi, monarch," or "Hi, milkweeds. I'm glad to see you. Thank you." And I always talk to them. And when I break them off, I'm saying, "I'm just taking these home so I can protect the monarchs."
see, I think that matters. I mean, it matters because I believe that everything is soulful. I have these friends, these trees outside my skylight windows here a maple is right there. And that tree helped me get through COVID. And I also, I've said this, but it was so powerful. I felt like the first day of lockdown, something was terribly wrong outside. And I walked outside and trees were being cut down. And I believe what was happening was the trees were like weeping,
Right.
crying to each other. These were old friends. They'd been around for 100 years, 50 years. That's a long time, maybe even longer than that. And they were being cut down so that an apartment building could be built next door. And I felt their heaviness. I felt their sadness. And you know what we're talking about now? Well, I just want to ask you, you know what I'm talking about here.
Yes,
And you've experienced this in other ways too?
I did. When I lived in Richmond, Virginia, right around the block from Krispy Kreme's, I my friends built a house and I moved there with my friend to cook for her because she was going to be a full-time student
Okay.
and her husband was staying in Phoenix. So I moved to Richmond, Virginia, and they built a house and we moved to that house. And then next to it was a beautiful grove of trees. To me, I saw the witches there because it was like so grovey. And I when so the developers then built on the next lot, which was that lot. And when they cut those trees down, I knew I could feel it.
Uh,
I could feel the sadness, so sad. Oh,
yeah.
yep,
I'm so grateful now that there is research to back up what we always knew, and also research to teach me what I never knew, help me learn what I never knew. But one of the things I always knew is that everything got a soul. Everything is worthy of respect. I mean, a stone, there are devices we can use to like just look at a stone in my hand, and it's like how many millennial old.
right.
So where did that stone
I
come
got
from?
one on my necklace. It's called a
Oh,
brachiopod.
because it's got the stripes.
It's got stripe. Well, the stripes actually are the wires. My brother made it. We found it
Oh,
on the beach. It's a fossil. I think it's more than it's 4 million years old. Wait, let me look.
I love that. So it's a
How
brachiopod. So
old are brachiopods?
550 million years.
can't hear.
550 million years.
Is that all, Siri? Come on.
550 million years old. Right there.
That's beautiful. See, what I loved to do as a kid was to discover a rock that had a story in it. And a story was like a brachiopod, or a story was like some other bug's frame that was in the rock. Or I also liked watching and finding rocks that had striations through them, because that meant that something formed that line. I still collect those rocks. I bring them from wherever. I put them in my suitcase and I just put them in my yard near the flowers. I love that.
I have a
So,
bin full of rocks out in my garage, which I'm kind of embarrassed about, but I would take them to school and, the kids would stack them and we would study them. We'd get out the magnifying glasses and I love those rocks. So I've gotten rid of a lot of teaching stuff, but I can't get rid of my bin full of rocks.
maybe you don't need to, girl, or maybe put them in your will. So
Right,
when you leave this earth, some teacher who's a beginning teacher can have those rocks, and that means centuries or like decades of babies will be able to
right.
hold those rocks. It's I think I want to ask you, because we're at a point here in this conversation where we were going to talk about something and yet something else has emerged. I had it in my mind and somewhat in my heart that we were going to talk about. So if we're raised without boundaries and our boundaries were invaded, and as you said, we didn't have safety, how do we learn to have boundaries? And it's still a worthy topic. But I'm also thinking that what we're doing is we've gone into how our mother and our father was nature, mother and father nature.
Right.
And we felt safe there and we could learn there. What else could you do in nature that you couldn't do inside the four walls?
Oh my gosh. Explore, um, you know, not be encumbered by other people's desires. Because in the home, we were supposed to be attending to what somebody might need,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to be ladylike. And outside, no, you could just go, just be.
So we could explore, we could exist. We didn't have to be ladylike, which meant we could be natural. And being natural in a natural environment was like so affirming because beauty emerged and ugliness emerged, but everything had a season,
And I
everything had
could
a
see what I
season.
was capable of and take risks. And oh, yeah, outdoors was so much better.
And learn from the transformation. I mean, Denise, let's just keep tracking this. How many caterpillars, very hungry caterpillars, have you brought into a safe place this so far this year, 2000?
Today, this season, I have one that is a very hungry caterpillar. I had to put it in the big cage with the big plants
Good.
because they become so very hungry that they will eat the eggs on other leaves without even knowing. So I keep my eggs and my little tiny, tiny caterpillars in a different aquarium that is safer. So right now I have one very hungry caterpillar. I think I'll call it Carl. Oh,
Carl.
there's a hummingbird right here by my window right now.
Oh,
I think I'll call it Carl after Eric Carl or
yeah, good.
Eric.
Oh,
I'll call
okay.
the first one Eric. I'll call the next one Carl.
Okay, so we got Eric. Eric's the
Eric
first.
and Carl are both hatched.
Okay.
Carl's very tiny and still in the safety aquarium. And then I have two more seeds.
All right. And then once they get hatched, they get names. So we've got Eric,
And Carl.
Carl, and very, and then hungry.
Right. And then we could go each of the items that the story goes through. Like there was one pear, two apples. I'll have to get the book again
Yeah,
so I
what a
can,
great idea. Because children would really identify with that.
and then I will remember their names because I'll have them right there. That'll
So
be good. And then we can start over with Eric the second, Carl the second, Apple
I'm
the
Eric the
second.
third, I am Eric the third, I am.
Yeah.
I love it. You know what? Let's explore this a bit more because I feel it's something deeply true for trauma survivors that once we got outside of the hellacious, I'll speak for myself, the frightening, terrifying, foreboding, judgmental, cruel, abusive, neglectful, really, really horrendous four walls. Once I got outside of those four walls, I could become me. And let's talk about that. Could you become you?
Yes. Oh, when I got
How?
on my bicycle, I was so me.
Yes. Well, how are you made to describe being on? Because I've for four
Just,
years since we've been working on this task, you've said the wind in your hair.
yeah, and the movement and the getting away, you know, transportation. Oh, yeah, transportation.
Freedom,
Adventure.
adventure, absolutely. How did you adventure on your bicycle?
My friend Cindy Shirting and I would go, we had a couple different places. We would go to my aunt's bar called the Stagecoach,
All
and we
right.
could get a nice, fresh uh, fountain Coca-Cola. And then we would ride our bikes over to the other side of town where her dad and uncle and their family had a pop factory called Moore Brothers. And we'd go over there and get a Moore Brother pop.
By then you'd be thirsty.
Right. It was a thirsty ride. And we would also we rode to the North End, which you can't even go all that way up Central anymore, but we would ride our bikes all the way up Central Avenue to the North End. And
What was in the North End? Was that the Italian part of town by any chance?
no, it wasn't. It was I don't know. Now it's kind of the poor area. I think it was too. We ended up moving there with my stepfather's family, uh, which I don't know. It seemed like the poor area, not
Mm.
ghetto so much, but I don't know.
Well,
Yeah, how to
it was a
describe it.
ghetto. If ghetto simply means a place where people who have that have similarities, have the same trait, have the same characteristic, get put to be separated from others because they aren't well appreciated,
Right.
then
Or fell off. They were just poor.
yeah.
They were poor working class people.
My grandfather, when he moved from some Calton estate to Sicily, lived in the Sicilian ghetto. It really was a ghetto because it was just where people of Sicilian heritage were allowed to live. And after they were able to build up enough RES, PECT, and enough funding, they got to move out to places called Greece, New York, outside of the Sicilian ghetto of Rochester, and then moved in people of Hispanic heritage, and they became the folk in the ghetto who were not respected, and everybody wanted to keep out of their hair. So first the Sicilians, probably was Germans before them, but there's like the ghetto was where you weren't wanted, but you could be with your own, and you could speak your own language, and you looked like other people, and you had the same traditions. So did you have similarities with the people in your ghetto, even though it was
Actually,
a class
we
ghetto?
we moved there when I was a sophomore in high school, the summer
Mm.
in between my freshman and sophomore year, or maybe it was between my sophomore and junior year. So
Oh,
I had
wow.
already established friends. I was going to go to the same high school. So I never really
Oh, wow.
integrated into the North End.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. What was your stepfather's ethnicity if he had one?
I don't know. His father, we didn't meet until my brother was born and he had a grandson. So he came. His mom lived with her mom and invalid sister. We never, they tried to pretend like he was Italian. He opened a pizza joint, but
Good
no,
move if you want to sell pizza, pretend you're Italian.
right. I mean, his name was Kennelly.
Hmm.
Actually, I saw the name in Mexico also as Canelas.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
And cannelli in Italian, canal, it's the cone around which dough is wrapped to form the cannoli. The cannoli is named for the cone. I did this once. I made these. You wrap the pastry around it's like a hollow tube. Then you dump it in the oil till it gets all crispy. And then in the meantime, you've already made, or you're making fresh because it has to be fresh, regatta cheese, um, chocolate chips. Back in the day from Sicily, it was like candied fruits, not the kind that you put in yucky
Not fruitcake.
fruit cakes. Now that was yucky, but like kind of like a candy that you could really taste the orange flavor in it. Yeah, so maybe it was Mexican. It was something he was ashamed of, right?
I don't know. They never talked about it. His dad was married 9 times, you know, once for one night. It that's really the
Wow.
story that's the heritage that I know about.
What was his dad's first name?
Frank.
I'm Frank the Ninth. I am Frank.
I actually call my checking account Frank, and I say that's my husband. My husband won't let me buy that. My
I
husband
like
Frank
it.
put me on a spending spree.
I like it.
Once I got once I got 2 kayaks, I bought myself 2 kayaks and I told
Ooh,
everyone at work, oh, my husband got them for me.
I love that. I love that. I have a friend who's been divorced for years, and her grandsons come to stay with her. And when she had 2 cars, they said, "Oh, that must be your husband's car." I love
Right,
it. Well, girl, we're being playful now, which is a natural thing that results from thinking and recalling about being outside. And
right,
when we start going back into the yuck stuff, like the restrictions or the man married 9 times, or that can take away from the playful thing. But I think at the soul of every child, if not every rock, if not every rabbit, if not every tree, is freedom. And freedom is playfulness. And early childhood educators have not always known, but many of them, like Maria Montessori, have known that at the soul of a child is play, and play is where the child is connected with the divine. How else would you describe play?
play. Yeah, it's definitely free. I'm just imagining myself at the sandbox. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, you're self uh motivated. You are
Yeah.
engaged in a way that is just free.
You use the word before, explorer. Does that fit?
Yeah, you're exploring everything. Play is just really cool. I love play. I encourage it.
Oh, honey, when I was a kid, with the minute I got outside the door, the world was mine to explore. Not that I owned it, the world was my haven and my sanctuary, and it was a learning. Everything was about learning, and every day changed. You know what? Sure, it was the same porch and the same door, but it didn't feel that way because if it was misty rain, I had to go back in the house and put something else on. If it was snowing, I had to get that snowsuit I had with the pinned on mittens
Right,
fit into the mittens. If it was a sunny day, I could wear shorts and a t-shirt and go barefooted all summer long until I stepped on a bee and the bee stung me and my foot got not infected, but it got all blown up and awful. And then after it happened this way every year. I stepped on one bee. I'm sorry, bee. And I got this awful scratchy, itchy, big puffy foot. And then it was all right again. I never stepped on another bee, but I think what happened was my skin got toughened up so that I wasn't as bee couldn't as naturally bite.
right,
Because I kept running on the clover. I kept running through the meadows. I was not afraid. That's another thing, isn't it, about being a trauma surviving child? And to go outside, we could explore and not be afraid.
right. Instead of being hyper vigilant about
Yes.
everything that's going on, we could focus right here in front of us on what is now.
It was like having a protective parent right there, right now. Nobody was going to hurt me. I could sit and watch that caterpillar. I used to call them, what are those wonderful things that are woolies, the woolly caterpillars.
Right,
I used to watch them because they marked by looking at the woolly caterpillars. Those are the ones with the rich, dark, midnight black, and then an amber rusty color in the middle, and then the midnight black um, at the end. And when I look closely, they have whorls. They're whatever those things are, whiskery type things are in whorls. They're not just straight sticking up. They like swirly. So I would watch them make their way as if they knew where they were going. They
right,
knew what their life was about. It was like ants. I watched them in fascination. They always knew their job. Beavers, they had a great work ethic. I love things that knew their purpose. How did they know their purpose? They were born with a purpose. I mean, those were my models of life. If I
Right.
looked at the people inside the house, did they have a purpose? Well, it seemed like their purpose was to be unhappy and pretend that they were happy.
And
I don't,
outside too, like always, whenever I was molested, which was by several men, uh, it was inside and private. But when you're outside, it's all public. So
right.
that's another feeling of safety outside.
That's a huge thing, Denise, because I have never truly felt safe in my own bedroom until I owned my own house solo. I I've yeah, I don't need to go deeply into that, but of course, as I said last week, I don't even know if my door had a lock on it. I don't even think it did, and if it did, we weren't allowed to use it. We could not lock our doors, and that meant that every night, whenever he wanted to, the pedophile in the house could come and choose to molest me or maybe my sister. Actually, that was a horrible learning, Denise, because if he didn't choose me, I mean, I know both you and I were really practiced at acting as if we were asleep.
Right.
But the sad thing about that was somebody else was going to be molested if it wasn't me.
Right.
Maybe I hoped that my sister would be sleeping too, but he wouldn't quit. He knew his mission, he knew his purpose, sadly, and he wasn't going to quit until he
Yeah.
got satisfied.
I really believed that I was protecting my sisters by submitting.
I think in a way you were. I'm sad to say that, but you were. But I was the youngest. Was nobody preventing
Right.
that with me? And for the longest time, I thought I was the only one. Maybe I was, but I doubt it. And families, come on.
Yeah, I thought I was the only one too, but then my sister, uh, actually in high school, she reported, and I lied and said, "Oh no, nothing happening here."
And why did you lie,
But
sweetie? What rule were you following?
keep silent, protect
Don't
the
tell
family.
anybody. Protect the
Yeah,
family. I
right.
tell you, I had a really moving experience with, I'll never forget him. His name was Walter Munsey, Munsey. He was what they used to call them practice teachers, when the teachers' colleges, like I grew up in upstate New York, and so there was Cornell University, and then there was um, Shippensburg State Teachers College, and state teachers college students had to come out and do a semester of practice. So we often had these practice teachers. So this really awful social studies teacher thank God, she was 20 facts Drew, honey. All we had to do is memorize facts, read the book, memorize facts. And we just had to hand in 20 facts every night. That was our homework. So I figured the hell with this, man. I wrote the top sentence on page 222 has 8 words in it. That was a fact. I did whatever because I was so sick of doing this
Sassy.
sassy girl, but she never read the homework as long as we had 20 things listed. So we got Walter Munsey, and he came, and this is like very similar to your sister confessing and telling the truth, getting help, but forever being labeled. And then you being the sister who said, "Oh, no, I'm fine." Walter Munsey one time said, "Could I talk with you?" And I said, "Sure." Um, and I was sassy in class too. I spoke up and I did a lot of things. And I was a Tom girl. This was 7th grade. So I was like 10 or 11 because I was skipped a grade. So he took me down to this auditorium, which was in a beautiful arts and crafts building built in the like 1920s. That was my high school and had really pretty stuff in it. And he said, and I remember this perfectly. I remember the light beams streaming in through the windows. I remember standing at the back of the auditorium with him, and he said to me, It was like a lighthouse beacon. He said to me, and I'll just say what he said. He said, you're very bright, you're very quick, you're funny, you got a lot of energy. And yet I can't help but feel something's wrong. I can't help but feel something's wrong. And there's that you're very sad about something. Is there anything at home you want to tell me about? And I held on to that moment for decades because someone had seen me.
Right.
Someone had seen me, and I didn't answer right away. I didn't have the words to answer. I didn't have permission to answer. I didn't have the consciousness. How could I break out and tell the truth without being annihilated right there? So I waited and I savored his words and I felt them. I felt them like a flutter inside of me. It's almost like, when you talk about getting crushes, that was the same kind of
Sensation.
free sensation. It was like a frisson. It was like, oh my God. By the way, we got to end in about 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. But I'll wrap this. It was so important to me because he was telling the truth and he was seeing the truth in me. He might have been then the only next person that saw the truth in me. The first one was the man who was the photographer that came in when I was 3 years old and actually called me by name and had these little bunnies and stuff that he would wanted me to interact with. And I did. And he got great pictures because he saw me. So what did I do? I said, I'm going home with you, okay? To the photographer. When William or Walter Munsey said to me, there's something wrong, you're sad about something, I savored that. I savored that because it was so true. But I also could only say to him, like you said, oh no, everything's
fine.
fine. Everything's fine. And he looked at me and said, are you sure? You sure? Oh, yes, everything's fine. And I felt like that was such a beautiful moment because someone had seen. I didn't even contemplate the possibility of saying, yeah, my father's raping me. I didn't even know the word rape, but my father's
Right.
coming into my room at night and doing things that are totally horrid. I can't stand them. My father beats me. I can't stand it. My mother goes crazy and fills the house with these horrible sounds. I could never even fathom articulating that, let
Right.
alone sharing it with someone else. And that's the trauma. And yet outside, I could be all of that. I didn't have to pretend I was happy when I wasn't.
Right.
I could be sad outside. I could be joyful outside. I could have feelings outside. I didn't know the names of feelings. I didn't know what I was feeling, but I felt them. I organized bicycle hikes and we would go for miles and miles and miles out in the country. We didn't go into the city. The city was small. It was more like a village. But when I organized those hikes, we went miles and miles into Caton, into maybe Gang Mills, into Painted Post. We went to all these places as far as we could go to get away from. And sometimes, like you, we had a quest. And one of the quests we did was to go to Dan's Dairy in Painted Post, New York, because Dan's Dairy literally had the cows right there. The ice cream place was in the front. We could order, and my favorite was this creamy chocolate ice cream. And then we could climb up to the second floor and we could walk around and see the cows being milked down beneath.
Wow.
Of course, I was a sassy badass and I would stomp so the crowds would look up at us. But that was freedom. Nobody knew where I was. Nobody cared where I was.
Right.
And that was the benefit of being neglected and abandoned. It was free. I was in charge, and that was probably where I developed some leadership skills. I mean, what about you? I invited all these people to go on bike hikes, and people knew that it was okay to go on bike hikes with me. We'd leave at a certain time, we'd pack our lunches, we'd get back at a certain time. But during that time, we were free. And I get it that you were free during that time, girl.
Yeah, I did have freedom. And, because of neglect, I wasn't, nobody was over me.
So maybe that's a way we can close, because you just said, because of neglect, nobody was over me. And I would say similarly, because I was abandoned, because nobody cared, I could care about things that mattered to me.
Right.
I didn't ever say that to myself, but I knew I could do what I wanted to do once I was outside. And maybe here's a way to close. So see what this, if this makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, it's okay. The freedom that we had from being abandoned and neglected was what ostracized, traumatized children got as a gift. Because when no one cared, we were free to discover. And when I was outside, I could discover outside of myself. When I was inside the house, everything took place inside of me. Until I had a panic attack and I was terrified that something awful was going to happen. And then there was no discovery inside of myself. There was just survival.
Right.
So how do we turn this? I'm not saying we have to preach happiness, but if at the end of each program, we can at least reflect upon a way in which the trauma which was put upon us helped us become who we are, not in a negative way. I mean, trauma is negative, let me just say it. But
Right.
somehow healing, there was somehow a seed of healing. Just like every time you gather a caterpillar's eggs, there's a seed of a butterfly, there's a seed of freedom. Did you feel any way in which there was a seed of freedom in being abandoned, neglected, and just not cared for?
Well, I really try to find the silver lining of things. I'm an
Mhm.
optimist like you. And so I never felt cared, loved.
Mhm.
However, in that, I don't know how to turn that one into a silver lining. But I learned to love myself and love the freedom of when I was away.
Maybe that's it, Denise. I want to build on that if you're okay with that,
Yeah,
because I didn't, I learned that I wasn't loved. I learned that I wasn't lovable, but I was able to see when I got away from that, that was, looking back on it now, that was a reality inside the house. In other words, that was the truth of life within the family. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't loved. I wasn't cared for. Okay. But there was a driving force inside of me that said, girl, you deserve to have a good life. You deserve to have fun. I think it's in every child, like this desire to get free. That's a
right,
huge childlike desire. So I did whatever I had to do to get out that door, which meant I would do whatever yuck cola, cleaning the toilet, um, chores, so that when everything was done, I could go out that door and be free. And when I didn't have chores to do, I got up in the morning before anybody was up, and I took that Wonder Bread and that PB&J, and I slathered that on, and I wrapped it in wax paper neatly, put it in a pocket or something, took maybe an apple to, I don't know how, canteens, World War II canteens. That was how we carried water, because there were no plastic water bottles. There was
right,
nothing like that. So we had a canteen that we got from somebody that'd been in the war, really. And then I took off for the day. Sometimes I took off with people, be like on bike hikes. But when I was little, I would just take off. And the freedom in that, when I look back, sweetie, and I'll end with this. I think the gift within the trauma, and I'm not saying trauma was a gift, but the if I looked inside the horror. The gift that was waiting, if I had just the heart to find it, was that I really was born to know that life had meaning, life had beauty, and that I was part of something bigger than just the family, which told me I was nothing. And, next week I'll tune in, but next week I'll be in New Orleans, and it'll be at a professional learning institute for people, mostly in America, but also around the world, who are early childhood professionals. And my topic is, I'm presenting with another woman, so our topic is how music heals the traumatized soul.
Awesome.
Do you feel that's true?
Yes, I do.
And here's what I've learned being with you today, my friend. Being in music, being with music is like being out of doors. It's an exploration that lets my soul flow freely. It's got rhythms, it's got a pace, it's got a beat, it's got a flow. And when I allow myself to be in the music, I'm free again. I'm free again.
It's a good sensation to be free.
It's a good sensation to be free. And even at the worst of times now, this is what I'm working on too, at the worst of times. Because I'm thinking, one day I'm going to die. And what happens if I don't have the external freedoms, or my body is letting me down? What have I got? I will always have my soul. I will always have my soul. And that's probably what I get down to at that last breath, is my soul. So the freedom of that. Sweetie, that's what I want to say goodbye to people with. What about you? Is there anything that, just looking back on our time together today, that helps you see that being a trauma survivor has got its own possibilities hidden within?
Yes, I believe that. I believe that we can turn the negative effects, except for the physical ones, like our thinking that goes wacko sometimes. But yeah, we can have better. We deserve better. We can create better.
Maybe you just set a topic for next week. What do we do when our thinking goes wacko?
Yeah,
That's a consequence. That's a consequence. My brain flatlines and I can't think straight, and panic attacks can take over. And yet, what can we do to both be in those moments, and what can we do to ward off those moments so we can stay
right. Or
true
recover
and
from.
recover? Those three things: how to prevent, be in, and recover from.
Yeah.
Okay, Denise, would you say, hey, Gracie, George and
Good
Gracie?
night, Grace.
Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are. Hey, love you, Denise. Thank you so much.
Right.
This has been a pleasure. And everybody listening, you can please just contact Denise and contact me. Rokitsky is
That's
spelled
right. We're
Ro.
available to listen
Yeah, we are. And to
and
interact.
reflect.
Yeah. So just look us up on, just Google Denise, Kick I. Kick I.
Yep.
Rokitsky in Polish, or Rokiki.
Rokiki.
Rokiki. And
They used
Holly
to say,
Elissa.
kick me, Rokiki.
Oh, man.
That's what they said in elementary school.
I believe it. Did you do it?
Probably.
Because the badass within was always there, yearning to be free. Okay, I'm going to sign us off and say, if you're listening to us after the fact and you hear things that you want to talk about, bring them next Monday.
Heck
Next
yeah.
Monday, 3 o'clock in East Coast US, and 8 o'clock in London, and whatever o'clock in India, and whatever o'clock in Alaska. Join us so that we can be trauma survivors, all of us.
Walking each other home.
You got it.